Okay, very excited to be joined here in studio with former Anchorage Assembly member Dick Traini. How you doing, Dick?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Pretty good. I'm very happy to chat with you. I was president of Taco Campbell Community Council
Right.
for years, and
Yeah.
you were on the Assembly for a long time. I think you were on for what, almost 20 years?
Almost 20 years, a little shy, a couple days shy of 20 years.
Now, the Assembly has term limits, so it's 3 terms.
Three-year terms. So I got to my second set of 3, and I had no chance of running again because the Supreme Court would have told me, just go away and don't bother us. So I had to decide what I wanted to do.
So once you do 3 terms, you can take a year off. You can go.
You can take a year off, but you got to come back. And, we were at the point in time where my wife said, it's time we moved. We lived in Anchorage for 52 years, 50 years, something like that. Anyway, so it's time we moved.
And you're in the Valley now.
We're in the Valley now, yes.
Well, the reason I want to talk to you is because you were on the Assembly a long time, but you were also chair for, I went back and checked, several times, totaling
10 years approximately.
Or 90s.
And I was vice chairman an additional 2 years. So I was involved with leadership on this assembly for a long time.
So I think you were first chair in 93, and then again in the 90s.
I've got
2000s.
a sheet out in the car if you want to say it just to.
I checked the Ballotpedia thing.
You
earlier.
did, huh?
Yeah. So obviously you've been watching the Assembly recently.
Yeah.
The mask mandate, very contentious. We've been there covering it. But even before this recent kind of contentious Assembly, spectacle or kind of chaos.
Chaos is a good word for it.
Going back last summer when the CARES Act thing kind of happened and the Assembly started to try to buy these buildings, it got a little bit crazy then too. And my kind of first memory of really the chaos was when, at one point when Felix Rivera was chair, there was like people doing push-ups.
People were doing push-ups laying on the floor, and it was just crazy. But the problem is, once you let the horse out of the barn, how do you put it back in again? Because we never had that problem before, because we told the public, here's the standards. This is going to be your level of decorum when you're in testifying. You get your 3 minutes. And we required the Assembly members also have decorum talking to the people. It worked out well. I had a few people take out handcuffs.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
For just
because
disruptive?
In one case, this lady would not shut up. She had her 3 minutes and she kept going on. So I had the security guard invite her to leave. When she didn't want to, they took her out in handcuffs. Didn't have a problem after that.
So you were on the Assembly at a couple times that come to mind. One was the Equal Rights Ordinance that whole summer in I think 2009, and then there was the AO 37.
I was not on the Assembly in 2009 when that first Equal Rights went through. I was on the Assembly the second time when we passed that ordinance on equal rights.
Okay, and that was that one summer where
there was a time period from 95 to 2010. I was not on the Assembly for that time period. And then I got reelected in 2010, and then I left in 2019 when my term was up.
So the one that really comes to mind to me that I kind of reminds me of some of this, but in a lot of ways different, was AO 37, the labor
AO 37, yes. We had hundreds of people that testified. But the difference was, I think in that case, we required a certain level of decorum there, much like being in a courthouse. If you tried to do the nonsense of doing that in a courthouse, you'd be in jail trying to figure out, when do I get out of here? And we maintain that level where you respect the people testifying, but they also have to respect the body.
What's been you've been watching these meetings?
Oh heavens, I watch them all, much to my wife's chagrin. There's not a single meeting that doesn't go by. She said, why don't you just move back into town? No, I live up here now.
What has been your, I guess, reaction, or when you're watching this, what are you thinking?
I'm appalled because the Assembly is not the body that was on before. When I was on there, we had liberals, we had Democrats, we had some terrorists, but you work together for a common good, and that common good was Anchorage, and they've lost that along the way.
One of the things we see a lot, especially from...
And I required mandatory attendance too. Let me tell you, there's only 2 reasons to be gone from a Assembly meeting. One, you were traveling for the city, out of state. The other one, you were dead. Short of that, you attended every Assembly meeting.
One of the things we've seen a lot is specifically Jamie Allard from the Assembly has been during this whole testimony, and they've kind of, even her aide admitted this, they're trying to run like the people's filibuster.
They're trying to run
asking
the clock.
Almost every single person questions to keep delaying. Mayor Bronson's gotten involved a few times. When you were chair, I mean, I remember going to meetings a lot and people would question, but have you ever seen something like that?
No. But Jamie's got the right to ask questions, okay? Until they they ruled she didn't have the right, or you couldn't ask questions. But at that time, when she was asking questions, you have the right to ask questions. Are they running out the clock? Probably. I think they want to deal with this recall. I think Meg's on recall coming up.
Election's ongoing right now. The ballots went out.
That may be part of it.
So, what were your thoughts about LaFrance's decision to basically end the questions from the Assembly members?
She's chairman. With 6 votes, she can do that.
One of the things,
I'm not going to fault her for doing that, because if you got 6 votes, you can run the meeting the way you want to run it.
One of the things we saw from specifically Allard, Kennedy, and then Bronson was they kept accusing LaFrance of stifling free speech. And I've spent a lot of time in Juneau, and the body, you said 6 votes, that's the majority. Yeah. Bodies have the right to run their meetings through the rules.
Yeah.
And they can make these decisions.
They can make them, and that's what LaFrance did. If people don't agree with them, they can run more people for the Assembly, get 6 votes, and they can put a new chairman in and make another decision. Because you're only chairman as long as you have 5 people and yourself that like you.
Mm-hmm.
Short of that, because I rolled 2 chairmen when I was on the Assembly.
Now, for the viewers' roll means
I took them out. They came in as chairman. They were no longer chairman when we ended the meeting. Had the votes to take them out as chairman. And, if they get 6 votes the other way, then she wouldn't be chairman. Right now, she's chairman of the Assembly. She's got the votes, and she can run the meeting the way she wants to.
Now, one of the things which makes the Assembly much different, I want to ask you about this. In Juneau, they aren't subject to the Open Meetings Act.
No, Juneau wrote the Open Meetings Act and exempted themselves from it, which I always find to be amazing.
My view is I think it's, in some ways, not all the time, but it's better to be able to have some private conversations behind closed doors to organize things and to have candid discussions where the Assembly cannot do that with more than 3 members, correct?
More than 3 members, you can't do that. For example, you can't even have an aide that works for 4 people because that's circumnavigating the Open Meetings Act. Juneau, I appreciate Open Meetings Act, but I wish they made it apply to them, but they didn't. They stuck it on here. So
could the Assembly exempt themselves, or does that require a state action?
That requires state action. So, for example, do you remember night before last, when somebody was complaining about the fact that some people may have guns in the Assembly chambers?
Mm-hmm.
And they were saying, why you let them come in here? Because state law says you have to.
Yeah.
State law says, for example, that somebody cannot have a sign on the door that say no guns. That's state law. If you don't like it, change the state law.
The first guy who was arrested last week during the first full day of night of testimony, he had a concealed gun. They found it afterwards, which he should have told him he had it.
He should have told the officer the minute he had a contact with the officer.
But I asked the officer afterwards, wanted to be clear, and I knew that you can carry in Alaska concealed, and especially in a government building, they can't stifle that. So he says, you can carry in here concealed or open, but if you get approached by a police officer and you're being interrogated, you have to disclose that.
First thing you have to do is tell them, hey, I'm carrying a gun. So you start that discussion out. That way they know up front. You're not trying to hide it.
So during this whole, not just LaFrance trying to prevent the members from asking questions, but there's other actions, and there's big, really bizarre procedural fights.
Yeah.
And she had really been kind of treated by Allard, and to some degree Bronson would even kind of weigh in on this stuff, and almost question her ability to act as chair. Would you agree with that, or her actions?
As long as she's got 6 votes, as chairman, she can run the meeting exactly the way she wants to. The mayor has the right to participate in the debate, and unlike other mayors, this one's actually participating. I remember when Berkowitz was mayor. I would ask him, any questions, Mayor? Any comments, Mayor? No questions. No comments. Look at every video. No comments. At least this one is participating.
Now, you were chair. You were on the Assembly a long time under probably several mayors.
6 mayors.
Have you ever seen a mayor get as involved as Bronson has been in the meetings?
No, I think Bronson looked at the charter and says, hey, it says the mayor can participate. And he's using that, which is no problem. That's his right. Other mayors didn't. But he's got Craig Campbell working with him, who was chairman of the Assembly. Mm-hmm. He's got
Domboski
as his
manager,
city manager. She was on the Assembly.
Adam Trombley's working for him too, who was on the Assembly.
Yeah. So I think they know what the mayor can and can't do. So he's trying.
So what are your thoughts about, now one of the meetings we saw, Domboski had tried to at some point cut the feed. She dismissed security. And even now it seems like at tonight's meeting there's going to be a discussion of the Assembly maybe taking legal action about kind of who controls the chambers, separation of power. It's a little bit different when the mayor, like I was kind of, I spent time in Juneau, it'd be unheard of for the governor to insert himself in legislative proceedings. Here it's a little bit different though, right?
A little bit different, but the assembly chambers belong to the assembly. There is no conceivable way I would ever let anybody, mayor, city manager, decide when security is going to be there.
What would you have done if you were chair and that happened?
I would have cut the funding for the security. I would have said your contract's now terminated. Because you can redo the assembly budget anytime. I simply would have, at the next meeting, brought that up and tell them you no longer have a job here and put it out for bid again. You know, you do have some ability to do things like that. So I would do it in a heartbeat.
So with the mayor, with the security, and then Amy Dabowski trying to cut the feed-in, one of the things that happened was I'm sure you saw, it was more of a symbolic gesture. I don't think that screen, that shield really did much.
Oh, that thing is silly.
But Trombley went and grabbed it and took it away as more of a symbolic, maybe like we're in charge action.
They're not in charge of the assembly chambers. That belongs to the Anchorage Assembly.
If you were chair and Trombley or someone took that shield away, what would you have? Would you have just let it happen?
It would not have got to that point. I would have sat down with the mayor when he first came in, had a talk with him about what works and what doesn't work, as I did with Tom Fink, as I did with Meistrom, as I did with Begich. We sat down and discussed how things are going to work. Fink and I used to go to lunch once a week where we discuss issues we had. We may not agree on the issues, but we discuss what was coming up in front of us. So you wouldn't have seen this kind of nonsense going on.
Do you see what's happening in Anchorage as a symptom of a larger national kind of breakdown?
I think it's a problem sweeping this country. You know, it's just, we seem to have lost, well, Congress first lost the ability to work together. And I think it's spreading out now to counties and states and cities where we're not working together anymore. And we need to. I was reading an article on, I think, Seattle, how they're dealing with their homeless. Because Anchorage has a big homeless problem, don't they? Seattle is now renting high-rise apartments downtown overlooking the Space Needle. And that's where they move the homeless people to. Because even homeless people need a decent place to live. Just crazy.
Yeah, no, I've been living here since '04, and I've seen some pretty contentious things on the assembly, but now it just seems different to me where there's this very open hostility in the meetings.
There wasn't the hatred before. And we realized that different people have different points of view, but you work through that because you should be working for the common good of Anchorage. That's why you ran for mayor, you ran for the assembly, was to work for the common good of the town. And that may not be happening now.
What's your view of all of this? Who do you, I guess, maybe hold more responsible, or do you think it's everybody's kind of?
I think it's everybody. You know, you can't cast stones at one person until your house is clean, and I think both sides have problems.
How do you think the assembly and the mayor come back from this and get back to regular order?
They sit down and have a discussion and understand they both have a role to play in city government and try and work out the problems. Otherwise, you're going to see this tit for tat just escalate even more. In fact, I think the assembly tonight is going to be introducing an EO that takes 9 votes to pass it, that will shut off debate on the mask and pass it, make it mandatory.
I've heard that might come up.
And if they do, then
why 9? I thought 8's kind of the threshold.
9's the magic number for an EO. I think what you'll see is then...
And that's emergency order?
Yes. I think what you'll see then is the public's going to do a referendum. I have no doubt they'll do that and get the signatures they need. As soon as they have the required amount of signatures, and the clerk can tell you how many they have to have, they submit that to the clerk. That suspends the EO immediately, the law on masks, until it goes to vote of the public.
So the assembly has 11 right now. They're going to add the 12th, I guess, in a year or two.
And that's ridiculous, but that's another problem they have.
That's going to probably happen in 23.
Okay, what's going to happen with 12 votes? You're going to have 6 on one side, 6 on the other.
It fails.
Who breaks the luck? There won't be one. They will fail.
It just fails. So you need
that's
7
what
to
I
pass.
told. That's what I told my friend downtown when Chris brought it forward. I said, "This is not going to work, Chris. It will not work." That's the reason everybody you see has an odd number.
So the assembly right now is 11. They have, I'd say, a solid kind of 9.
Solid 9.
The 8. I mean, Weddleton can kind of goes either way, but they definitely have.
It depends on the hour of the day.
Right, but they have 8, which is the override kind of threshold.
They
Now,
do.
It seems to me, and you're already seeing some of these people. Stephanie Taylor's running against Forrest Dunbar. She's been at these meetings. Kathy Hensley's running against Zaltel. She's been at these meetings. Yeah. It seems like Bronson is trying to, and I don't blame him. That's what I would do. try to bust up that supermajority, which is the veto override threshold.
Well, every mayor's tried to do that. I mean, Sullivan did it, for example. He would appoint people to the Budget Advisory Commission. So when they ran for the assembly seat, they would have experience, and they would always say in their ads, I have experience working with the assembly budget. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the mayor put you on the Budget Advisory Commission. Berkowitz did the same thing. He would put people on commissions so they could pump up the resumes. So,
I mean, if you look at Anchorage, I've brought this up before. You had people like Fink, and you had Knowles, and you had Begich, and you had Sullivan, and you had Maestrom. So it kind of
you had Maestrom.
It kind of already naturally swings. So we had 6 years of Sullivan, then we had 6 years of Berkowitz, almost 6 years, 5.5 years.
Yeah.
And then you had
he nuked himself
until the whole thing, the whole scandal went down. But so naturally, without any of this COVID and all this stuff with this kind of anger at the assembly, naturally it was already likely going to be a conservative mayor based on the Begich, Sullivan, Berkowitz. Bronson, kind of came in. They said people were mad at the assembly. He was able to kind of eke out a victory. But now we have these assembly races coming up, and that also, the assembly over time changes as well. Do you see the assembly probably changing a little bit next April?
I think the assembly will change a bit, yes. I think they're going to work hard to make that happen. I just hope they sit down and understand that Anchorage is one town. We unified it. I was listening to the testimony and debate the last meeting, and they were saying, well, Eagle River doesn't have any representation. Yes, Eagle River does. You've got two that represent Eagle River. But we unified the city back in '75. Remember, we took all the outlying areas, made it one town. We need to work together. Stretch it all the way from Girdwood down the Connect Bridge.
What was maybe an example or a story of where you really got at odds with the mayor, and how you might have solved that?
Sullivan, for example, with his SAP program.
Oh, the software.
Yes. He sold that to the Assembly at $9.3 million. Do you know what it finally ended up at?
Almost $100 million.
$92 million. Now, why didn't he go out and see what other towns had done? Heavens only knows. I asked him, we haven't done that yet. So I called San Diego and I said, what's your experience there with SAP? Well, it came in at $10 million and we finally finished it at about $40 million. Well, any mayor with his salt would have called and found out. How's another town dealt with this? Hershey's chocolate company,
Pennsylvania,
spent $100 million trying to make it work. So
there's all these stories: SAP, Oracle, PeopleSoft. I mean, these implementations. But
PeopleSoft would have worked had they bought the new version of PeopleSoft out. That would have worked. But anyway.
But you were that.
He and I were opposed on that, and AO37. Someone and I were opposed on that diametrically. When he brought that forward, I knew I'd get reelected because the people were just so upset with AO37.
And those were both big issues, but I never remember it being kind of vitriol.
Well, it wasn't personal, okay? It was business. It was different philosophies. But it wasn't personal. I think Sullivan's a nice man. I think Berkowitz is nice. Well, he was a nice person, but nonetheless.
Did you have lunch with Sullivan and Begich like you did with Fink, or?
With Begich, I did, yes. Not Sullivan so much. But Sullivan and I worked on the assembly together, too, so we had an experience working together on the assembly.
That's something else with Bronson. Like Sullivan was on the assembly, Berkowitz was in the legislature.
Bronson has no experience on the assembly.
Right, I think Begich was on the assembly.
Begich was on the assembly with me, yes.
So Bronson had run for the assembly once years ago, but no experience. Yeah. He has people around him, Dubosky, Trombley, Craig Campbell. Yeah. But he's still kind of new to all this.
Well, he's got a military background. He's got a pilot background, but he doesn't have any experience in this sort of environment. And this is a different ball game.
If he called you and said, Dick, you were on the assembly a long time, you were chair, what's your advice? What would you say to him?
Be glad to talk to him. Glad to go out to lunch with him and discuss things with him. Give me a call. My number's in the book. Or I use the same number I did when I was in assembly, so you can get a hold of me.
What would you tell him?
I'd like to talk to him about how we can work with the assembly, how they can work with him. What I don't want to see is them fighting constantly. For example, when Trombley took off that little pedestal that did nothing, if I was on the assembly and I was really mean-spirited, I'd simply delete this position.
Mm-hmm.
And the mayor, of course, would override that and would override his, and the positions would be gone. The mayor cannot by veto add anything back in the budget. And when you move to a different position, I'd delete that position too. You've got to work together.
And if you don't work together, you can obviously work against each other.
I don't think there's anybody on the assembly that has experience know how to deal with this.
What about, I'm curious your thoughts when he appointed Sammy Graham to be the librarian, which I thought, I know there's this library degree thing, but Bill Walker wrote her a letter, and they voted her down, which I thought was kind of silly. But
a librarian degree is just, it's nice to have it, but we've appointed other people for other things that didn't have the exact written down requirements that have done a good job.
Yeah, I thought it was silly they didn't confirm her, especially with Bill Walker writing the letter. But when they didn't confirm her, he right away announces, "Oh, now she's chief of staff. Her office will be at the library." Now that was obviously a kind of screw you to the assembly.
It was tit for tat.
What I'm curious what you think about that.
I think that was wrong, but it was wrong for the assembly to turn her down. I think she.
Yeah, I agree with that. It was.
She just because she doesn't have all the little dots and T's. For example, I remember when I made Barbara Jones.
Oh, the clerk.
The clerk. I made her ombudsman because we had a disaster of an ombudsman at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I made her ombudsman. And then we needed a clerk. So I made her clerk. And I was asked by people, why did you make her clerk? She doesn't have a clerk experience. I said, because she can manage an office. And I know the kind of clerk she'll be, and she's exactly that kind of clerk. She's done a great job managing the clerk's office.
Been there a long time.
Been a long time. I heard her.
When you were a chair, when you were in the assembly, how many times do you recall these fights over mayor's appointees happening? I mean, seems like pretty new to me.
It doesn't happen that often. I mean, I can't remember when we did it. Okay. There may have been one out there, but I don't remember which one it was.
Now it's like there's so many that this.
I know, it's like Saturday Night the Fights.
Yeah, it's part of me, it's like you go and it's something to watch and people, it's a little bit exciting, but it's also
Bring your popcorn.
Right, but it's also a little bit depressing that government to me should be, especially local government, should be boring.
Yeah,
it should be boring. Getting the business done isn't exciting.
Should be city business, getting city business done because you live in this city.
Yeah.
You expect the roads to be plowed, you expect public safety to happen, and you don't expect the fighting going on every Tuesday night. Now, who's going to be upset with who tonight? And so we'll see what this EO comes out tonight. I hope they don't do it, but I tend to think they're going to.
So this would allow them to basically shut down the testimony and then pass the mask ordinance.
Right, yeah. When Meg introduced this thing, she put a throwaway in there, and that was this private enforcement. That wasn't going to go forward anyway. Meg knew that when she brought that forward.
That was probably that has been the most
throwaway.
Most controversial part,
That was a throwaway. So she could say, hey, I'm compromising. I got rid of this. Well, did you really want to deal with that to begin with?
I guess
we tried that with the dog ordinance one time with barking dogs.
Wasn't there something with cats too at some point? I remember something.
Oh, Mark basically introduced a cat ordinance, and that was a disaster. We had every lady coming up forward, not to be sexist, but there wasn't that many men. We had a lot of ladies come in. Fluffy doesn't go and bother anybody. Why do you want Fluffy to have a license? So we got through that.
So I guess the question I want to ask you is, what are your thoughts about this mask ordinance from Meg and Pete?
It's a disaster. They shouldn't have introduced it if they weren't going to show up to assembly meetings, hear the testimony.
Right,
I'm sorry. If you have a problem with COVID, then wear 2 masks.
I wrote that in one of my columns. I said
my wife
not being
doesn't like my next comment. And if you play it, I'll probably get shot. Put them on your ears too if that bothers you. But the thing is, you don't introduce an ordinance, you're not going to be able to hear the testimony.
Besides not being there, which I agree it looks horrible. Bronson obviously is against it. We know he's going to veto it. Bringing it forward, I sent an email to Meg Zaltel about this, and she responded about, how much do you feel like you've played a role in this by introducing this thing when we all knew it was going to blow up. Maybe not this bad, but we knew it was going to blow up.
I got my shots as soon as they came out. Of course, I was in the military for 22 years. In the military, you do what they tell you to. I remember, did you go in the military at all?
No, but my dad was 25 years in the Navy.
Ask your dad about going through basic training, and what they do is you go through there. You go through a line, they shoot you on both sides with air guns, and you get shot with everything you didn't even know existed still.
Yeah, he joined in early 60s Vietnam era, and it was like he told the needle gun where they just shoot you up.
Ask your dad about Black Plague, because I remember one time they gave us a Black Plague shot. I was like, they haven't had that since the Middle Ages. But that was life. So as soon as the vaccine came out, my wife and I both got inoculated. And does it work all the time? No. But I've seen people that let's say, my son and my daughter-in-law both got their vaccines and still got the D variant.
Mm-hmm.
And that put them down for about a week. How much worse would it have been if they hadn't got the vaccine?
Well, if you look at all the data, I mean, the people that are hospitalized with this Delta thing, the vast, vast majority of them are not vaccinated.
Yeah.
And you can look at the line where it's like, people that are not vaccinated, it goes like this. People that are vaccinated who get it, hospitalization, it stays pretty flat.
But they're not on the ventilators as they are.
They aren't even in the hospital mostly.
The people that don't get vaccinated are playing chances with their life. It's like.
So you got yours, you must have been pretty early because you said.
The minute they came out with it, we got the Moderna vaccine.
I got mine in March and April, Moderna. So.
Now I hear we're going to get a booster, huh?
So they haven't approved Moderna yet. They've approved Pfizer. So Moderna, the efficacy trials
seems to be better.
Because it's got more. I don't know what the term is. More substance to it. It's I think more than double of the Pfizer one. But it's the efficacy after 4 months is still over 90%. Where I think with Pfizer goes down to 70-some%.
I mean, I remember as a kid, and your dad will tell you. Ask your dad about polio.
Yeah.
All the kids that had polio that couldn't walk, couldn't breathe. And I remember in school where they'd bring a tray of sugar cubes in. And the vaccine was on each sugar cube. What kid doesn't want a sugar cube?
Mm-hmm.
They passed it on like water. And we all got our polio vaccines.
I mean, this all seemed to have started maybe 15, I don't know if you know Jenny McCarthy, she came out, big anti-vaccine with the autism, and this is way before the COVID, but there's just been kind of this, a lot of it's not even science, doctors or people that understand the science, they come out and say these vaccines are bad, and then a lot of people, it's not just, you can be very left or very right, and you can be against the vaccine, so it's not necessarily political.
But we've gotten rid of so many diseases by getting vaccines for them.
Absolutely.
So all of a sudden, why is
Smallpox
this one bad and the other ones are good?
And measles and polio and all these.
I've heard all sorts of things. They're putting RIF chips in them so they can tell where you're at. I'd like to know if the government cares about me that much. They want an RIF chip in my body.
They have the cell phones.
Yeah.
It works pretty well.
What the heck?
Well, Dick, I really appreciate you coming and talking to us.
No problem. Anytime.
What are your, curious your thoughts or predictions for what's going to happen here in the next weeks and months?
I think that the Assemblyman from West Anchorage will introduce, because I saw a text where he said he was going to reduce an EO, and they'll pass it, and it'll be off the fights again. I think the public out there will be so mad about that, because testimony will be shut down. They'll pass it. They'll do a referendum and repeal it.
Where do you think the public is? I would say probably the majority, I venture to say, is probably against the mask mandate. Maybe it's close. But obviously the people showing up at the meetings are not representative of the entire public, some of the craziness.
No, they're not.
But they are very loud and they are very persistent.
But they've still got the rights to say what they think, and I'm sure they'll organize, get an attorney to write up the referendum they need, and get the signatures out there, and first call the clerk and see how many signatures they'll take. Signatures, I think it's like 10% of the vote in the last mayor election. And they'll be off the races getting signatures. And as soon as they give that to the clerk, it immediately suspends enforcement of it until it goes to vote of the public.
Well, I've said this a lot ever since this recall Dunleavy thing went to court. It's basically free for all, open season for recalls. We got Felix, Meg. Now probably they're going to be one against Bronson. I really hate. I think the legislature needs to really raise the standard. You have to be caught taking a bribe. You're missing an people can't find you. You committed a serious crime.
Or a photo with your backside shown.
Well, and that didn't even need. That just ended up the public.
I know.
That was
a joke on my part.
Right. It was. I wonder if he would have stayed and what would have happened. If it would have been.
Oh, I don't know.
He had 6 months left or something, a little longer than that actually.
I don't know. I feel sorry for his family, his wife, his kid. Nobody wants to do that kind of nonsense.
Had you ever seen anything like that in your whole time on the Assembly?
Never, ever.
There must have been some sketch. I think the one that comes to mind that I always think about is Alan Teshy. There was a voicemail. Wasn't there a voicemail or something?
Oh, that's where he called. I get coffee.
Coffee and Star, I think.
Maybe, but somehow the microphone, they could record it.
It called his house, and it was on the answering machine.
Some people have thought that somehow he had one of his friends put a listening device in there. It was crazy times. But we did recall people in the school before too.
Well, there was something in the 90s, right? Like big, wasn't there an affairs or people were sleeping with each other?
Yeah, there was. There was also a problem with the school district's finances, and I think they recalled 3 or 4 of them.
I was like in the 90s.
Walter Featherly was one of them that got recalled. He's still an attorney here in town.
Right.
And
I think there was also an affair happening. And there was an affair that was involved in that. Maybe it wasn't part of the recall, but that was like
I'm not
happening.
going to say who it was, but I remember it.
And it was. I remember went back and read some stories about it. And,
I remember who it was.
wow. So there was a little bit. There's always something going on.
Yeah, but
well,
that's
Dick,
the problem what you get from being old. You know, I've been here forever and a day.
Well,
I stepped off the airplane when I was 20 at Elmendorf. Had a choice, Vietnam or Alaska. I took Alaska.
And you told me before. That's a good pick. You told me before that you have 19 grandkids.
Yeah.
How? I mean, you must have a birthday coming up every few weeks.
Oh, we do. My wife has this nice little calendar on the wall that divides it into months and days. In fact, we just missed one like yesterday, day before. So we sent her a check out today.
And you have a great grandchild.
We just had our first great grandchild born down in Utah. My son Sean, his daughter, had a little girl.
Wow, 19. So,
yeah.
I can't even begin to. I mean, that's
one great grandchild.
Do you have a birthday at least once every month, or
it seems like?
Are they staggered like 1, 5? You know,
my wife takes
6
care
or
of everything.
1 month or something.
I'm blessed to have my wife. She sends some money, signs my name to it, like I know what I'm talking about. She does a great job.
Do you miss being on the assembly, or?
Oh, I miss it desperately because it was the greatest game in town. Did you ever grow up playing chess as a kid?
A little bit, yeah, not a lot, but a little bit.
It's like the ultimate chess game. To see if you do what's going to be the effect. I remember when we did photo radar.
That was Vegas, right?
The public loved photo radar. We first did it because it was only supposed to be when school was in session. We were trying to stop people from hitting kids. Meistrom didn't like it, so when he instituted it, he did it 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The public went nuts. For example, when school was not in session, we're still getting a ticket in the mail. And photo radar is more precise than a cop is. It makes no mistakes because you had a picture of the driver and a picture of the license plate. So he knew who was driving it and whose license it was.
I think to a lot of people it feels kind of like a big brother.
Right. Well, the problem was, had it just been enforced when we wanted it to be, which was just when school was in session, I don't think you would have seen the public reaction. But that wasn't to be. Meistrom went crazy on it, had 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and the public just ate us for breakfast.
I mean, that's what
they did a referendum and got rid of it.
That's what the best, not just politician, but business person or the best person can talk about chess. Think 4 or 5 moves ahead.
Yeah.
And look at the consequences. Where a lot of people, they think 1 move ahead, and then they don't really realize the repercussions of especially big decisions.
Yeah.
And that's what you see with really brilliant people. They can look ahead 4 or 5 or 6 moves.
But I remember the people that introduced photo radar was Mark Begich, myself, Pat Abney, and Joe Murdy. Mm-hmm. And people still beat us up over it. But at the time, we did it because the community councils, which you were a member of.
I was the president of a.
I know. Wanted it. We had, from all these community councils, they wanted to have this because they were concerned about kids getting hit in walkways. So.
Well, there's, I think, there's always something. So.
It's always something.
Well,
and, you don't always make the right decision.
Well, I'll be paying attention. I know you will too. I recommend maybe don't watch every time. Maybe just do something else.
Oh no, I watch all the time. It's just
it's like
something I do.
Addiction, right? A little bit.
Well, when you spend almost 20 years of your life doing it, you don't simply leave office and worship it away from not do it anymore. I like to see what's going on and how the people are acting. And
maybe you can run in the valley. That's even more exciting sometimes. It seems like.
I don't know. I've had talks about running for state office. I may go down there and cuss.
You actually ran in 2012 for the legislature, didn't you?
I won the Republican nomination for it and lost to a Democrat for that one. Yes.
That was 12, I think, right? I remember.
It was one of those times.
It's all blended. Well, Dick, I really want to thank you for coming in. I know you're busy, but I appreciate talking. I think it's very important.
My wife's probably waiting for me, wondering what I'm doing.
It's a very important issue happening, and I appreciate the insight and perspective from you. So
no
thank
problem.
You so
Anytime. Just let me know.
Okay. Again, I want to thank Dick Traini, former Anchorage Assembly member, for coming in and talking to us, and I want to thank GCI for making videos like this possible. This will be posted as a video, but also an audio podcast, so take a listen. And we're going to be doing a lot more of these interviews in studio and talking to folks. So thanks for tuning in, and I want to thank Scott Jensen for being such a great producer and making these possible. We'll be seeing you on the next one. Thanks, folks.